Okay. Typing your notes is not a problem. Notion, Obsidian, Google Docs, any of these note-taking apps, they are powerful tools. And when used at the right time, they can genuinely help you retain what you learn. So I'm not going to tell you to throw them away like most other videos would. The problem is most people are using these tools way too early in the learning process, which massively reduces their effectiveness. I've been a learning coach for the past 4 years, and I've coached thousands of students and professionals all around the world. And a huge part of this is note taking. And if I had to summarize the single problem, the single reason why type notes aren't being used to their fullest potential, it's because people go from linear to linear. They take information that's already in a straight line, a lecture, a book, a meeting, a blog, documentation, and they just type it into another straight line. Their brain doesn't have to think and do any processing. It just transcribes. And this is the same reason why people can spend hours on their notes and still kind of just feel like they're starting from scratch every single time. So in this video, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to show you what actually happens when you type the way most people do when they do their notes. And then I'm going to show you how you can go from linear to nonlinear using a 5-step process. And then I'll show you exactly when to bring in those note-taking apps again. So you can see what I've actually got here is I've got a blog article from James Clear open, and I've also got a Notion page open. So I'm going to demonstrate exactly how people are doing their type notes. I find that there's two main ways people do their type notes. The first one is just being a transcriber. They copy paste or they just type verbatim what's on the information or the resource that they're reading or listening to, and hope that as they write it, like their brain, because they wrote the sentence, they familiarize themselves with it and they will remember it. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy that I see is that people are often just summarizing a little bit, like they're using bullet points and they're copy pasting every now and then, they're paraphrasing it. These two approaches I will demonstrate here. The first one is just bad. You never want to do it. The second one is a bit better. But again, after this demonstration, we're going to go into that nonlinear format. So I'll show you how to do it on pen and paper or an iPad. I'll show you how to do it freehand. But let's start off with this process where people are typing notes. So this is actually what I see what happens. They will type with their fingers. So they'll say 5 triggers that make new habits stick. And they will just go on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to torture myself, and until the end of like Q1, I'm going to just type everything here. So in my new book, New York Times best-selling book, Atomic Habits, I explain that the process of building a habit can be divided into 4 simple steps. Cue, craving, response, and reward. Oh my god, this is torture. And then they'll do like H3, the habit loop. The image below shows the habit loop and how these 4 factors work together to build new habits. All right, and they'll take a screenshot of this, or they'll just copy the image and they'll just paste it there, and then they'll go to the bottom. Oh, I can't even believe I'm doing this. All right. Charles Duhigg and Nir Eyal deserve special recognition for their influence on this image. Representation of the habit loop is a combination of language that was popularized by Duhigg, book, The Power of Habit, and a design that was popularized by Eyal's book, Hooked. All right, each phase of the habit loop is important for building new habits. But today, I'd like to discuss the first factor, habit cues or triggers. There are 5 primary ways that a new habit can be triggered. If you understand each of them, then you can select the right one for the particular habit that you are working on. Here's what you need to know about each habit cue. So I'm probably just going to stop there actually. Now, this is the first approach that a lot of people use when they are wanting to type their notes. They just type verbatim and they do it for the whole thing, hoping that as they read and sub-vocalize and they type verbatim that they'll be able to remember anything. The problem with this approach is you can see this information is linear, and the way that the information has been represented here, I did the exact same thing. In fact, instead of doing all of that, I could have just copy pasted and I would have achieved like similar like note output, right? So the problem with this process is that my brain is not really working that hard. This feels way too easy to do. It feels too simple. And this is a red flag because we know that in the literature, especially when it comes to effective learning, we want to make sure that our learning process engages us in what we call desirable difficulty. This is a term that suggests that high quality learning actually requires your brain to work hard. Your brain needs to be thinking deeply about the information, and it needs to be manipulating it in a way in which is unique. Now, if I were to actually start a new page and I were to go to creating this here, and I were to try brain dumping. I'm not looking at the right hand side. I'll just open up something new here, and I try to like brain dump something here. Like for example, the 5 triggers. I can't even remember the paragraph I can't even remember the title. Like I genuinely can't. I'm trying to recall it. I know there's stuff about like the habit loop. There was like cue, response, like reward, trigger. I don't even think it was in that order. There's something about Charles Duhigg there as well. And then there was Eyal or something. And then there was like the book Hooked. And we're talking about triggers. Like that's all I can recall. So I spent all that time typing up all those notes. And this is all I can recall. But I can't even recall how these relate to one another. I can't even recall like the importance of these 2 people. They can't, that diagram, I don't even remember it. And that's probably like a really important diagram. So you can see, I don't even remember the title of the thing, but now I can see the habit loop. Okay, the habit loop is what we're talking about. That's what was part of the title. So that's obviously a problem because it's a process that's taking so much time to do, but it's just way too consuming, and the mastery that I develop here is very little. Now, if we move into the second way that people are using type notes, if we just put a divider here, and we just go to this part where people, let's say for Q1, the other way that they're doing it is they're reading Q1, time, and they're just going through this process of like taking bullet points, so time, most common way to trigger a habit, most common way. Like common morning is waking up, bathroom, okay, so morning, time, bathroom, and then shower, brush, dress, coffee. Okay. And then there's a less common times. For example, if you pay attention, you may notice that you repeat tasks mindlessly, heading up to get a snack, taking a smoking break at each time in the morning. If these are bad habits and you want to take stock of how you feel, bored, afternoon snacking, feeling lonely. The point is, if you understand the reason why these habits pop up, it at the same time becomes a habit. Yep, the bad habits are replaced. Okay, so like, different times of day, snacking, and then what was the other one? Like smoking, bad habits. Bad habits are replaced, right? And then if we just go back here, how I use it? Time-based cues, stick with routines. For example, every Monday and Thursday I write a new article, post it on James Clear. Yep. Doesn't matter how good or bad I feel. It doesn't matter how long. All that matters is I stick to the schedule. The time triggers the habit loop. So time triggering the habit loop. There we go. So these notes, you can see, much less detailed than what we've done up here, but I would feel a bit more confident if I just tried recalling them. So, let's see how much I can recall. So if I just go to divider, I might be able to say, well, obviously we've got like the habit. I'm not looking at the left-hand side, by the way, like I'm not trying to cheat. So there was something about how, there's a habit loop, and one of the big things for the habit loop is time. So for example, times of day actually trigger certain habits. And what's happening here is that, for example, in the morning, all of us instinctively, we either, hopefully brush our teeth, we use the bathroom, we might shower. Some of us use our phones in the morning, too soon, right? Coffee, and then, getting dressed, checking Google Calendar, like all these things here. And then there's also maybe afternoon, start feeling bored, snack, want to go eat, whatever it is, like etc. And then in the evening, like smoking, whatever. I don't smoke, so I don't really know. Okay, yeah. And then essentially what's happening is that, James Clear gave an example. Sticking to the schedule is good. He writes on Monday, Thursday. For habit loops, investigate and do an order of time of time when certain habits occur. Yeah, and then we'll move on to the next. So it's just like, well, there's also going to be that process of just doing it, even if it's not the best. Like that's what he said for writing. So this one here, you can see this process here, it was definitely a bit better because what I'm doing is that I'm making the knowledge a bit more unique to how I'm thinking about it. And I'm trying to, again, find how the information could be related. The only difference here, the nuance I should mention, is that I've had a lot of cognitive retraining. So, just being a learning coach, having used these techniques in my own learning goals and having been really good at it, I actually feel very uncomfortable doing this process. I will let you know, like my brain is feeling a lot of resistance from typing and doing all of this. It doesn't want to do this because I'm going to show you a more optimal method by, having the camera and doing that nonlinear note-taking method. But you can see this is how people are using their linear notes. I find that most people, unfortunately, are actually using it this first way. They're using it in a way in which they're transcribing, they're just typing away. And I even find this approach here, you can see, even though, yes, technically this is a bit better, it's still lacking because, for example, it's not connecting the ideas to other parts of this page. We're going to go down. It's going to keep being linear. It's just going to keep going down, down, down. But in terms of how Q1 influences Q2, how does Q1 time even relate to, certain ideas talked about here in the habit loop? And how does it relate to down the page? Like, we just have to wait so long to get to that point. And as I'm going to be writing and as I keep typing, I'm probably going to forget a lot of this. I'm going to forget a ton of what was even mentioned. I mean, you can even notice when I was doing this process, I even forgot the title of the actual blog. So this process here, this is what linear notes is. This is what happens when we take it from linear to linear. And the problem here is that we're not giving our brain the opportunity to actually explore relationships that exist in this information, explore how the information is relevant to us. We're not creating meaning in a way in which allows us to actually deeply engage with the content. And a really big thing is what we want to aim for is we want to aim for the mastery that James Clear had in the first place to replicate this type of article. So the goal that many people try achieving, especially with this first approach to linear notes, is they're trying to remember and memorize this whole article. But that shouldn't be the goal because James Clear himself would not be able to recall this article perfectly, verbatim. He would be able to rather recreate a similar article because he has such a deep understanding of what the habit loop is, the components of the habit loop, the different frameworks that the habit loop has, like different ways of exploring the habit loop, different mechanisms in which the habit loop explores, cue, craving, etc., and how these steps relate to one another. Different examples in his personal life that demonstrate the cue, the craving, certain habits, different understandings of other people's schedules. And he has all these unique ways of thinking about the information. But it's definitely not in this linear format. The way that it's in his brain, it's represented in these webs, these interconnected webs of knowledge. In the research and the literature, we call this schema theory. So instead of using this linear approach where we've got our note-taking app, we've got our resource of choice, and we're typing away, and we're not really investing a lot of that cognitive effort. Our brain is forgetting this information at a micro level. What we're doing here instead is we want to actually delay this process. So what we're going to do is we're going to put Notion to the side, and we're actually going to take out a piece of paper, pen, or if you've got an iPad and a stylus, a tablet, we're going to use that first, because instead of going from linear, which is what this blog is in, we want to go from linear to non-linear, and then we can go back to linear, because that process of going from linear to non-linear, number one, it has more desirable difficulty. Number two, it's a lot harder. But number three, it engages your brain a lot more. So I'm going to demonstrate this right now. So you can see now we've moved into a different camera angle. And essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to use pen and paper first. Or if you do, I would highly, 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 highly encourage, if you've got access to an iPad or something or a tablet, to use that, because it's way easier to do this process. On this piece of paper, I'm going to write the 5 steps that we're going to use in order to actually execute this process of linear to nonlinear. And you guys can't see, but on my monitor screen, I've actually got the James Clear blog post there. So the 5 triggers that make new habits stick. So I'm using that. You can make reference to that. So let's quickly actually just write down what the 5 steps are, just so you're all able to follow through. And I think that's clear enough, maybe. Actually, let's switch into something else. I'll be clear. Cool. So the first step is to delay. What's going to happen is, as we are doing our notes and as we are getting used to actually using pen and paper or stylus, we do not want to engage in that process as I did when I was typing linear notes and on my Notion, to immediately type. We actually want to give ourselves the opportunity just to read. I talked about this in a previous video, but essentially what you want to do is you want to remember that learning happens in the brain. There's a lot of invisible things that need to happen in your brain for learning to even occur. And that's why learning how to learn is so difficult, because again, learning is invisible, and getting better at learning often requires you being patient with these invisible things happening. So what delay means is you want to delay your note taking. What's going to happen is that this piece of paper is going to stay clean for like 5-10 minutes. I'm going to be reading that blog post first. I'm going to be giving myself the opportunity to read it, actually consume it, digest it, and then I can start committing to the piece of paper. So you can already see, like, having paper already forces you to essentially stop typing, stop searching things up on Google and, copy pasting things, stop opening up, your new browser if you're kind of like me, like just really distracted, and just focus on what you need to do. So let's quickly go through the next 4 steps and then we'll actually do the demonstration. The second one is, now that you've delayed it, obviously during this time, you want to be asking questions, you want to be just thinking about the content a bit more, and we'll show you how to do that, thinking using paper. You then want to teach. And I call this micro teach. So probably not going to have space. Maybe we'll quickly have space. There we go. And what micro teaching is, it's essentially a way to process the information that you've read. So now that you've delayed it, before we commit it to paper, I actually want to teach it. I want to teach a 10-year-old what I've just learned and what I've just read. Because if I can do that, that's a really good sign that I probably know what I'm talking about and I've made it my own. I've actually digested it. But if I can't teach it, well, that's a gap. That means I shouldn't actually commit anything to paper yet. I can use it to like scaffold how I'm thinking about things, but it probably means that I need to process it a bit more. So you can already see these 2 processes force you to break out of that linear to linear. we're going from linear to nonlinear. And these two, they don't even involve anything writing on page yet. You haven't even written anything on the page. So that's what you're committing to here. The third one is once you've done these, this is when you can start to offload onto the actual paper a bit more. And we'll go through what that means. This is where you can start having keywords, arrows, and diagrams. One of the rules here is we do not want to use paragraphs because that's what linear is. Non-linear is when we're using nodes, when we're using relationships, something similar to our mind map. And the reason this is going to work for us this time is because we've actually done these two invisible processes. This one's more visible, but this one's more invisible. When people tell me that they've done mind maps in the past and it hasn't worked, it's always because they change what's visible, but they don't change what's invisible. And the reason that's an important distinction is because effective learning and getting better at learning often requires us to change what's invisible, but it's really easy to change what's visible. So these two processes, especially in this order where we're delaying it, we're micro teaching, and then we're offloading, this is very important to make sure that when we actually create this nonlinear map on this piece of paper, it goes well. Otherwise, for many people, they just end up not really like going through that process. Like the things that happen in their brain, it's still as if it's linear. What's happening in their brain is still linear. So it doesn't matter if the format has changed. Fundamentally, the way that they're thinking is still linear, and that's going to be the bottleneck. The fourth one here and the fifth one, they kind of go hand in hand. This is to embrace chaos. So I'll just put embrace there, because what's going to happen is inevitably our notes are going to be quite messy. And the last point here is going to be to clean it up. And this is after it's gotten too chaotic. And this process is quite recursive. You'll embrace the chaos, you'll let it get messy, and then you'll clean it up. You'll embrace chaos, you clean it up. And so you can see this is where using something like an iPad is so useful, because you can easily just double tap and it'll undo the map. You can like use a lasso tool and move it around. Whereas on a piece of paper, you kind of have to start from scratch. You have to start from a new page. But nonetheless, this is still like a really good way of getting started for this process. So we're just going to keep those 5 to the side, and I'm going to quickly demonstrate like how I'd actually go by doing this. So I'm going to read, and I might even just set a timer for myself. Like for example, I might set a timer just for 5 minutes where I do not want to do any typing, anything on my page yet, and I just want to read. Obviously, for demonstrations purposes, I'm going to keep it a lot shorter. I'm actually going to do 3 minutes this time. And what I'm doing on the screen is I'm actually I'm like reading the actual like article, the blog post. So we're going to start that timer, and I'm going to delay, and then we're going to do micro teaching. So let's start that timer for 3 minutes. Okay, so we've got 50 more seconds left, and I'm just scrolling. I'm just reading that article. I'm getting a good sense of how things are, and I'm feeling quite okay. So I'm probably just going to stop here. And I'm going to teach. Again, as I'm teaching it, I can look at the article, but this is the way that I'm thinking about it. So, in this article, if I just teach a 10-year-old, let's say for example, I'm going to teach this rickshaw here, 10-year-old rickshaw. I can like pretend and look at it. So I'm actually looking at it. I'll just say, hey, Mr. 10-year-old rickshaw. So I just need you to think about how there are many things that you do on autopilot. There's certain decisions that you make and you don't have to worry about it. Your brain doesn't have to really deeply think about it. And we call these habits. So for example, when you go to the toilet in the morning, when you brush your teeth, when you hurt your finger and you accidentally swear, well, you habitually swear, or if you get really angry or you smash your table, those are all habits that actually occur. And from what I can read from the article, there is a breakdown of the anatomy of a habit. There is something called the trigger, and the trigger is actually what makes your brain initiate and potentially think about the habit. So for example, a trigger to go to the toilet is when you feel like you're busting, or when you feel like you have to go poop, right? And therefore, like, your brain doesn't really have to think about it. As soon as your body feels like pressure, it just goes, right? Or to brush your teeth, it's when in the morning you wake up and your mouth feels a bit disgusting, I guess you could say. And these things are actually triggers. And then once you get triggered, there's another thing I forgot, but essentially you respond to that. Your body responds to that, and then once your body responds to that, it gets there's like a response there. So you can see I'm struggling a little bit, and that's fine, but I'm micro teaching that a little bit, and I feel like there's been a good way of doing it. And the last thing that I want to teach this 10-year-old is that there's 5 trigger types that was talked about. So now what I might do, now that the micro teach, now I can offload. So take a look at this. What I'll do is I will actually I'm not using paragraphs. Remember, I don't want to use paragraphs. I definitely want to use the keywords and pictures here. So one of the pictures that I might use here is habit. Here we go. Like one of the keywords. And what I found out was that habit, there was like the anatomy of a habit that was talked about, in my opinion. And that anatomy was really cool. It was like that 4 quadrant that talked about Q. And then I think Q leads into, I can't remember, or Q or trigger, right? Or is Q and trigger the same? I really can't remember. And then that leads into a craving, I think it was. And then I think it was response. And then I think it was like reward or outcome, reward or punishment. I'm not sure what it was here. And then that leads back into that. So essentially what this article was talking about, it's really just focusing on this part here. And there's 5 types of triggers that was being talked about. These parts, craving, response, punishment, etc., weren't talked about. So this is already communicating a lot, by the way. You can see I've only used that in 3 minutes, and I've read through that article, and I've already got like this flow that looks pretty good. And if I take a look at the article, I'm not looking at the article actually, never mind. From what I remember, there was time, there was people, there was emotional state. Oh, there was something else. I can't remember it. Those 2 are escaping my mind. I didn't teach them well enough. I didn't teach these parts either, like people and emotional. I taught time quite well. There's some other ones. I think I'll get back to that. But you can see what I'm doing is that I'm letting my brain just recall as much as it can. So micro teach and offload. During this offloading process, you just want to try guessing as much as you want, as much as you can. So there was 5 here. There's 2 more. Okay. I'm annoyed that I can't remember it. But then I remember reading something towards the end of the article, which said that you actually want to prioritize this in a certain way. So the priority of this should be based on what's the most actionable. So actionable and easy, whichever one is most actionable and easy to you. So that's what I feel like this article talked about. Now, again, you can see I've kind of jumped the ship because I was micro teaching, but then I offloaded. But now I'm realizing there's some parts that I don't remember and I don't understand. And even this part here, I still need a micro teach. So what I'm going to do is I might just go back to the notes, right? And then I might just let it, again, be chaotic and embrace it. And then I might try micro teaching it again. So Okay, I'm just going to go take a look at what those other two were. Preceding event. Okay, so there was time, location. Okay, so location was another one here as well. Location, and then preceding event, emotional state, and other people. So preceding event, that's also another one here as well. Preceding event. Okay, yep. And then there was like an order of priority that they gave too. Okay, nice. So that was in blue. Now what I might do is I might quickly just try teaching the flow because it's starting to feel a bit chaotic. Like again, I'm going to embrace more chaos because there's probably going to be more things that come. But the way I see it is that time, people, location, these all kind of feel like the same thing in my opinion. While location and physical and people, I feel like time, people, time kind of happens, people and location, that's environment. And then preceding events is kind of a consequence of another behavior, and then time. Okay, that's one thing. All right, so I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. I'm trying to like create like a sliding scale because this said actionable and easy. What I want to do is I want to figure out of these five, at the top, which one's the most actionable and easy, and at the bottom, which one's the least actionable and easy. I feel like my brain is just naturally gravitating towards that. So what I might do here is I might say, okay, I feel like the most actionable, in my opinion, okay, is people. People, in my opinion, are not super. It's hard, but especially if it's family, I feel like people is like number five. Like that's the hardest one to change, in my opinion. Like you really gotta like move, you gotta have hard conversations. I feel like that's quite hard to change. I feel like even like emotional state as well. Maybe that's also fourth. In my opinion, I feel like location is quite easy to change, but then again, there is something about being at home and that being hard. Number two, number three, maybe like preceding events is a bit easy to change than time. I don't know. Like this is me just really. I now that I say this, I'm a bit confused. I'm not sure if that's actually the case. So I'm trying to find ways. Again, I'm gonna embrace the chaos, but then every now and then I do want to clean it up. All right, so it's getting a bit overwhelming now. What I might do is I might try teaching again. I'm going to do this in another color just to simplify it for myself. So I don't want to consume more information. Again, when it gets overwhelming, like micro teaching and offloading, these are your two best friends. But as soon as it starts to feel easy, this is when you go back into delay, and that's when you start to go expose yourself to the resource. So if I had to teach to a 10-year-old, okay, Mr. 10-year-old, I need you to think about habits. Habits are like automatic actions that you can do. And there are also other actions that are more intentional, but those aren't habits. Those are like decisions that you make. So they're automatic. What are some examples of habits? Well, you go to the bathroom. That's one thing. Hopefully as a 10-year-old, you're not smoking, but smoking is one thing. You reach out to your mom's phone and you want to play video games anytime that you're on the bus. So that's one habit. And essentially there are different places and different cues that trigger different habits. So time, one thing that we just talked about is if you want to play a video game, maybe you're playing that on the way to school, right? Your being on the bus actually triggers you to play video games because you're bored. Other people, maybe you see your friends, and when you see your friends, you get really happy and you start, you have this habit of potentially hugging them when you first see them. So it's just a habit that you hug them, like you don't even need to think about it. Emotional state, maybe when you're very upset and anxious, you bite your nails. And then preceding events, I didn't read this as much, so I'm kind of having to guess here. We'll get back to that. Location is actually probably this one. Yeah, on the way to school. But location might be, well, let's see, what's an example here? Maybe when you're in the kitchen, you instinctively check like the snack bar, and you always want to go get like a cookie, right? Anytime you find yourself in the kitchen. Preceding event is quite hard for me to understand. I can't remember that, so that's like a gap in my ability to teach. So yeah, okay. All right, let me keep going. You can see the map is getting quite chaotic. I do want to definitely clean it up later. Here we go. So emotional state. Preceding event. Response. So again, you can see I've gone back to the delay part. I just want to put my pen down and delay my note taking a little bit. Okay. So preceding event is basically just saying that it's a habit in response to something that happens. So your phone buzzes, pick it up. Okay, I see. So essentially what it's saying, if I had to explain to the 10-year-old, preceding event just means like a lot of habits like rapid firing over one another. So for example, when you check your phone, you might check Instagram first, and then after checking Instagram, you might check Facebook, and then after checking Facebook, you might then check something like YouTube, and then after you checked all these, you might go back to Facebook, back into Instagram. I don't like this example. Maybe there's a better example here. Oh, like a more productive example is like maybe this is what I personally do when I go over for prayers. What I do is because the gym is close by, I just go to the gym, and then I'm able to walk it back home. And usually I actually have like a calendar event that's also associated to then call home, like call family. So maybe that's also that, because this is a habit. Like anytime my alarm goes off for prayer, I just automatically just head towards, and then I go to the gym because I'm already in like clothes that I can exercise in, and then I'm walking back home anyway. And if it's usually prayer times, usually they're quite consistent. So if it's like a 7 p.m. kind of thing, I have a notification that goes off. And usually before this time, I'm always calling family. So I feel like that's what it says, preceding event. There's like one thing that triggers, like a domino effect that's going on here. So again, I'd have to kind of explain that to a 10-year-old here as well. Okay, so you can see it's starting to get a bit messy, like in terms of this map here. There's also parts of the map that I haven't explored, like response. I actually don't think I got it right. Maybe see it. Okay, so Q leads into craving. Craving leads to response. Response leads to reward. Okay, yes, I did get it right. Nice, awesome. And it's this 4-step process. Let's see if we can just get this one here. It's first, and then second, and then third, and then fourth. Here we go. Nice. And that's exactly what's happening in this process, like that kind of thing there. Cool. So I would want to learn a little bit more about that, but again, like the scope of this map is starting to die down. There's also some things that Charles Duhigg, so there's 2 names that were mentioned here, like Charles Duhigg, here we go, and then there's also Eyal, what was it, Nir Eyal as well, that was mentioned here too. So those are some names that are coming because they probably like popularized this diagram a little bit. Yeah, so that's really cool. Now, I might want to just do this last step here, again, kind of going back to micro teaching and then eventually getting into clean, because this map, you can see it's getting quite chaotic. Like the flow is very hard to actually understand. What I want to do now is I might want to take a look and see if there's a way that I can relate it to my own life. How can I try making this information relevant for myself? So what I might say here is, okay, well, I think the way I could probably, just give me a few seconds. What's a bad habit that I've had recently? Checking my phone in the morning. Unfortunately, that's actually a very, very bad habit that I've had recently. And what's happening is, if I take a look, I would say it's definitely going to be the time. Time is a big one. Like as soon as I wake up, there's something happening there. And then especially location, like my bedroom, those are definitely triggers. And then if I take a look at preceding events, it's like I wake up, and then I kind of open my eyes, and then the room is dark, and then I look at my phone, it's on the other side of the room, and then I just like go get it, and then I go back into bed, and then I kind of just open up messages and just do all those things. So that's not great. Emotional state, it could be because I'm tired as well. People, I live by myself, so I don't think it's going to be that. Maybe it's people messaging me, so maybe that could be one thing here as well. But yeah, like this process is happening. It's like a weird, that's how I feel like I could implement it. And if I just read here, it seems like James Clear has also mentioned other ways to make it relevant. Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is the map. Now the fourth part, like embrace, I mean, that happens as you do this map and you let it be chaotic. Last part is clean. When it comes to cleaning, what we need to do here is we need to have a few essential features in the map, but one of the essential features that we always talk about is you want to actually have your main ideas prioritized. Main idea or flow, like the core logic, needs to be prioritized. So the easy way that you can actually clean this up is you need to ask yourself, if I had to only just pick 2 or 3 main ideas, like just the core logic, what do I think it would be? So in my understanding of this, I would say that one of the core ideas here would be the priority. Okay, let me use another color because it's getting a bit crazy. I'm try using a dark blue. Priority is like one of the main ideas because that's how James Clear is talking about the way that you apply it in your own life. Another one here is just going to be the idea of like the queue itself, which is the main idea, one of the main ideas. And then another one here is going to be, is it really going to be habit? I think maybe it could be habit. It could be habit as well. Yeah. So I feel like obviously the habit is what we're studying that leads into the queue. And because of we have different queues and we have different queue triggers, we then want to prioritize them as well. And by prioritizing them, we can actually go through that process there. So that's what I see the core logic to be. Now, I'm not going to use another page just because, you know, trees and all. I just want to save some paper. And what I might do if I was starting a new page is I want to clean it up. So I'm going to say that, you know, habit leads into queue, or one of the components of a habit. If we just take a look at it, one of the components is queue. So that's what I could say, right? And there's like 4 components and queue is just one of those components. If I really wanted to, I can also mention the other 3 components, queue, craving, then response, and then reward here as well. And then I could go to queue, and queue had 5 things coming out of it. There was 5 things there. And then obviously queue led to like a level of priority that we want to then place. And that's the core logic. If I had to summarize what this article is about, it's about talking about habits and what habits are, really dissecting the anatomy of it, and then prioritizing cues. And there's 5 different types of cues that exist, or triggers, and there's actually a hierarchy and like a priority that we want to place to these, to apply these in our own lives. And then obviously I would kind of write down the 5 cues here. If I could, I would actually further group this information here as well, because then that leads to like a better organization here too. And then there's priority placed here too. So priority is like where, cool, like I just kind of want to understand like the order in which James Clear said that I should tackle these, and hey, I might make it personalized here, and then I'll put all the other details into this map, and then I can add really cool things. I can add visuals, for example. So if there's like a habit that I'm already thinking about that I want to get rid of, I can add a really nice nitty-gritty visual to like really embrace like this core structure. So let me think if I can think about a visual. Okay, this is going to be really absurd, but I think I need to do it. I used to have a very bad Fortnite addiction, and obviously in Fortnite, you know how there's like the take the L kind of emoji? So what I'm thinking about here is like maybe there's someone holding up like a take the L kind of thing. You know, like in Fortnite, how they used to do that. Oh, this is such a bad... But this is the thing about what's it? Visualization. You want to make it personalized. So if I just take a look here, maybe I could just zoom in a little bit so you guys could see it. Here we go. If we just zoom in a little bit into this part here. You know, if I just take the L, you know, like how they take the L, and then what's happening here essentially is I'm thinking about how a habit is here. Habit is at the top of the L, and then Q is this guy himself, and then priority is here. So you can see what I've done there is I've used like spatial arrangement to create this visual, like habit leads into Q, leads into priority. It's like this L shape that's going on here, and that's quite memorable because, you know, take the L, and then like this Fortnite guy, right? I could like make it more detailed, and then essentially I just like group things here. You know, I just put the mind map there. There's 5 arrows there. There's like a hierarchy here. And that's quite easy for me to remember. Like, I'll just be like, oh, cool. This is my Fortnite mind map, right? Like this mind map that I've created here. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go introduce our note-taking process. We're going to introduce our note-taking apps again. And this is where you'll start to see, because a question that a lot of people have is like, cool, this is all non-linear, but I need to use the information in a linear way. So don't worry, we're now going to get Notion back and we're going to try linearizing this. And this will actually show you the power of nonlinear notes in the first place. Now, this is where our note-taking apps come back. So you can see I've done the non-linear map. I've got it here. Here we go. And, you know, a really common question that I get is like, dude, these non-linear maps don't look like they have any detail. It just looks really broad. But I'm going to demonstrate this process, which is called linearization. This is where you want to use your note-taking apps like Notion, like Obsidian, once you've done the syncing. Because now, essentially, the task that you can have is you can just create your own textbook. So I want to now pretend as if I'm creating that article that James Clear created in the first place. And you can see I am forcing myself. I'm not going to look at his article anymore because I've studied it. And I want to make something that's unique to me. And you'll start to see, I'll be able to populate this quite well. So I might start off with actually typing out like a bullet point list and then like typing out full sentences. So what did I learn from this? From this, I learned, if I take a look at my Fortnite L, the James Clear article talked about 3 main things. First, it defined habits and the anatomy of habit. Second, it focused on one particular part of the anatomy of a habit. Finally, it gave recommendations. There are 4 parts of a habit. You know, you can see, I kind of remember there is cue/trigger, and then there's craving, and there is response, and there is reward/punishment. And you can see, second, it focused particularly on cue/trigger and 5 different types of cues/triggers that exist. And I can then say that based on my map, I can see that there was time, people, location/place, right? And then there was emotional state. And then there was also the preceding events. And he said something about like habit stacking being one thing there as well. So finally, it gave recommendations on the order of priority that one should tackle these cues/triggers if they want to change their behavior or /habits. An important note that he made was that bad habits are not eliminated, they are replaced. So that's something I noticed as well. And the recommendation it gave towards the end of that article was saying you should go ahead and prioritize the one that is easiest and most actionable for you. That's what it said, right? So you can already see, like, this is a lot of detail, and I'm linearizing it because, again, the way that I need to use the information, especially if I'm giving a presentation, if I'm going to speak to a friend about this, if I want to write my own like lessons, if I'm teaching like professionals and students and I need to create more lesson plans on behavior change, like this is the type of way I need to represent it. But you can see, I'm just letting it out loose. I'm just linearizing it, and I'm being quite loose here. I'm not being like too meticulous. Like, did he say reward and punishment? Technically, he only said reward. It's like, no, I don't care. Like, I just want to let it all out. So you can see that L really helped because habit was the first thing, and then the Q was the second main idea, one particular part of habit, Q. And finally, it gave recommendations of the priority. So you can see, like, I've got that flow and I've linearized it. But look how long it took me to write this in a linear form. But look how little time it took me to write that in that non-linear form. Do you see that? And I really had to think about that hard. That Fortnite L, I've been thinking about it. That's actually really memorable. I had a really bad Fortnite addiction. I'm glad I got rid of it. Anyway, so you can see, like, that's what I've done. And now I can populate it even more because I'm going to, like, give examples here. And I'm going to, like, talk about time. I'm going to talk about the example that I gave around on the way to school or even in the morning, you go to the bathroom, people, like if they're your friends, you might instinctively hug and shake their hand. Location, maybe there's some people that just are just revolting to you. Location in place, like school or the kitchen. Emotional state, if you're feeling anxious, you might bite your nails instinctively. I actually had a friend that used to do this, and what they did was they got like nail polish that didn't really change your nail color, but anytime you bite your nails, there's like a really disgusting taste. So that's the way that they got rid of that habit. That's a great habit. I probably need to try that one day. And then preceding events, which is like habit stacking. So if you do a habit, it's going to stack there. And I just keep going. I can keep going and I can keep populating this. I have so much more time to go here. I can even have like a section on why this is relevant to me. Examples of other people that I've seen, and I've just given you the example of my friend, and I can like populate this quite a lot, and I can go through all these points here, and I can talk about them pretty well, right? You can imagine, I can go for a very long time. I can even clean this up to make it look nicer. But the idea is I've been able to replicate that type of thinking towards this article. Maybe I might actually want to be, how I tried ranking the level of importance of each of these in order, like which one's the easiest to hardest. I might actually create like a paragraph expanding on the order of priority. So for example, for some people, it's actually very easy to get rid of like other people in their lives. They might have the money to be able to move out. Maybe they're moving out for college or university. So it's very easy for them to move out eventually. And therefore for them, if they can just get rid of the people, cool, do that. Right? Maybe that's the most potent way to change their behavior. Maybe it's time, maybe it's emotional state. So you can see these are the things that I'm already thinking about and I'm linearizing it. But if I took notes like this right here, you can see this, I didn't even get to a meaningful amount of time here. And if I were to try recalling this, it'd be so hard because the way that my brain likes to store information, the way our brains like to store information are in these interconnected webs. This demonstration that we did together. So we want to let ourselves do that first, and then we can linearize. The problem here is that a lot of people have the fear that, I've non-linearized my notes, but I need to use it in a linear way. And it's like, yeah, you just linearize it again. You do this linear brain dump. You create your own textbook as like as an activity that you can do. You teach a 10-year-old. You create a YouTube video on it. Why not? Like apply it to your own life. You can linearize it again. So don't be scared that these notes are not in like a format that is ready for your retrieval needs. That's okay, because again, the first part of our learning, we are just focused on really retaining this, making it relevant to our brains, and making sure that we are able to use the information when the time comes. And you can see I've been able to do this very well here. So this is the process of linearization, and this is when you would actually reintroduce your note-taking process and your note-taking apps. If you enjoyed the demonstration, let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Or if you got any questions, please feel free to leave them. I'm responding to every single comment.